it's something that has gone just way too far, and I think the ideological aspect and the emotional aspect for some people has sort of just completely taken over the rational and sensible side of things. Because if the true issue was just having people being able to compete in various sports, then there are other ways that you could handle it rather than that won't affect women's sports in general.
I am honored to have a British women's weightlifting champion here. That is, you're the first.
First, well, you know, not a lot of people can do what I do, so.
Yeah, not a lot of people can do it. And for those who don't know what we're talking about, let's roll to the videotape. That is pretty incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, that is 528 pounds that you did. Yeah. And you identified as a woman as you were doing that lift.
I did. Yeah, so, man, what can I say? The last 6 months, the last 6 months have been weird.
Tell me about how that all came to be.
Okay, so to give people some context on that video, on the 26th of February, 2019, I posted that video on Twitter with a caption just saying, I keep hearing about how biological men have no strength advantage over women in 2019. So watch me break the women's deadlift record without trying. And then I wrote at the bottom, P.S. I identified as a woman while lifting the weight, so don't be a bigot. I put it out there, like I put a lot of content and tweets out there, not necessarily expecting some sort of huge global response to it, and the whole thing went nuts. The video has now got about 1.8 million views. It was covered nationally, internationally, on all these different programs, all these different pundits, different podcasts. It just blew the gates wide open. At the time that I tweeted that on Twitter, I had 15,000 followers and have now got about 117,000 as we're recording this. So, you know, 100K gain, largely due to the catalyst of that video, which was weird, but it seems like it touched on a lot of nerves. I didn't realize how wide that conversation was happening at the moment, so it seems like it was timed perfectly. I did it just very flippantly without huge foresight as to what was going to happen, but yeah, it's good to be known for what you do, I guess.
Yeah, so I don't want to go too far off that. So you have a really interesting family background and where you've moved and grew up and went to college and all those things. We're going to hit all that, but somebody watching this must be thinking, well, why would someone go ahead and do that unless they're a transphobe, unless they have some sort of irrational fear of trans people? What point were you trying to make there?
There's no irrational fear of anybody. I have no discrimination towards anybody nor any group at all. I think people who levy that accusation are actually trying to get away from what the actual point of the video was, which was that we have got this situation that's happening in a lot of different countries. I mean, even I think might affect the actual Olympics as well now, where there's this strange debate taking place about whether or not biological men who identify as women or who are trans women should be competing against biological, natural-born women in various sports. You've seen this happening in everything from MMA to athletics to weightlifting to soccer, all these different sports. And it's one of those things that's a weird debate to me, because anyone who's just familiar with basic biology.
It's basic biology.
Yeah, it's not about unfair discrimination or any kind of hatred or bigotry towards any group or anything like that. It's just simply saying, look, there's a clear, distinct physical advantage here, and everyone who kind of exists in the real world is aware of that. That's why men and women's sports are divided to begin with and always have been.
Yeah.
And when you're seeing this happening, I mean, in certain sports, you've seen people come out there and crush some of these women's
well, there's all those pictures of the wrestlers.
It's something that has gone just way too far, and I think the ideological aspect and the emotional aspect for some people has sort of just completely taken over the rational and sensible side of things. Because if the true issue was just having people being able to compete in various sports, then there are other ways that you could handle it rather than that won't affect women's sports in general.
So what would you do
saying,
then with transgender athletes?
Well, firstly, this is interesting because most people don't actually know this, is that most men's sports divisions are not actually men's sports divisions. They're just open. This is something I actually learned quite recently. So there's not actually a rule saying this is only for men. It's just that, so whether you're talking about, I think, even things like the NBA, the NHL, the Major League Baseball, they're not actually, there's no rule saying you have to be a man to be in the team.
As opposed to the WNBA, which is saying we are the Women's National Basketball Association.
Exactly.
Right.
So you could either, to me, the most obvious things would be either you just have an open category and anyone who is not, anyone, man, woman, trans man, whatever, anyone can compete in the men's division as long as they are within the limits and boundaries of those when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs and testosterone levels and things like that. That would be an existing solution that's already there. Or simply, if there are enough athletes, I don't know how many, transgender male athletes genuinely exist at that professional level, but if there were, you could also just have another division, and that way you wouldn't be putting women at risk or making things unfair for them. And you'd also have anyone who genuinely just wants to be able to compete and play. Anyone can compete and play. So I think either of those two solutions would make more sense. So the reason why I say I think it's more ideologically driven is because rather than doing that, people do want to shoehorn it into the existing categories, despite the fact that there are large biological differences. There is an advantage. Even if people were to suppress their testosterone levels, there's still an advantage. It would be like, maybe a good example would be like a guy who's using steroids for 10 years and then goes off of them. They've still got an advantage over a man who's never used steroids ever in their life, regardless of the sport.
Right. So, is the ultimate irony, of course, that actually by you doing that, because you were just calling out the hypocrisy and nonsense around this and how it's activist-driven rather than reality-driven, let's say, that you actually were taking what I think would be a true feminist position, really, right? You were taking the more pro-woman position. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It's weird. I think even in the world of feminism, which I'm not a part of nor a big fan of in its modern day incarnations, this issue seems to be quite a big split that seems to be taking place there, because you've got, I guess, I don't know all the terminology, but you have the sort of more gender critical feminists or the more radical feminists who are totally opposed to this, and then you have the more liberal feminists who are saying, oh no, well, trans women are women, so we need to allow them to come into these spaces, whether those are changing rooms or bathrooms or sports or anything like that, regardless of some of the potential consequences. And it's actually kind of interesting to watch from afar and see that split taking place there. But with me, I'm very much about fairness, and and it's one of those things that's very obviously unfair.
Yeah. Were you shocked sort of when this was catching fire and you did a whole bunch of podcasts and I think some TV appearances and things? Were you shocked the way you got support from certain quarters that maybe you didn't think you were going to get support, and probably got if I've been through this once or twice myself, got hate from a lot of quarters that you didn't think you were going to get hate? Or was it obvious to you at that point?
It was fairly obvious to me where the support would come from and where the minor pushback. To be honest, the pushback was pretty minor, in the grand scheme of things. When I say minor, I mean millions of people saw that thing. So the minor could still be several hundred or even thousands of people, but 99.9% of people understood it, got that there was no malice. I received tons of messages, actually. I mean, I do have followers who are trans, and I've got fans who are trans, and they, funnily enough, none of them took it as some kind of assault or insult or anything. They understood the point, they understood the humor, and so I received actually a lot of messages in support from me from actual trans people. It was probably
a breath of fresh air for them, right? Because I get emails from trans people when I discuss issues like this, where people say, yeah, that is the reality. I'm trans, but I'm not trying to deny reality. It's an activist-driven thing,
exactly,
as you said earlier, as opposed to what just regular people want, which is just equality.
Yeah. Well, I think with most things, I think with a lot of groups that I see, I don't think the activists are very representative of the wider population. So I don't think that trans activists necessarily truly represent trans people. I don't think that, LGBT activists necessarily represent LGBT people. I don't think that black activists necessarily generally represent black people. I don't think that feminism really represents the average woman. It represents their own motives and goals and ideas and stuff like that, but I don't think it's truly a reflection of the wider groups. And in most of these cases, nobody appointed them to have this position or this power or to speak to them.
But they yell a lot, so that counts, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the problem. So too many people think that just because someone yells a lot or because they're loud, that they are the voice of reason or representation, which I think you see this across all these boards and these various intersectional groups, and it's just not true.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.